I'll just recap, I guess, what we know at this point, what happened last night, and then I'll open it up for questions beyond that. I can tell you last night about 9 o'clock, a family was at Willowstone Park having a family gathering. They were unable to find, as they were packing up, the 6-year-old boy and started to do a search for the child. One of the family members then seen the child come out of a porta potty, and when talking to the child, they also noticed that a male suspect came out behind the child from inside the porta potty. Finding this to be unusual, the family relative immediately confronted the male, who indicated that the child had temporarily been stuck in the porta potty and he was letting them out. The male then walked away, and the family continued to gather their belongings and head home. At that point, the child was able to describe that they had been a victim of criminal sexual conduct inside the porta potty with the male suspect who had just left. This call came in about 1 hour later from the time it occurred to the time the Brooklyn Park police officers received the call. They did respond up, and an extensive search was conducted to look for the suspect. However, he was not located. That investigation has continued throughout today as we canvass the neighborhoods and continue to gather potential suspects, but at this time we have no one in custody. What we know at this point is we are looking for a 20 to 25-year-old black male with a shaved side of his head, however longer hair on top. That male was wearing a black t-shirt and had white tennis shoes on. We're asking anybody that may have been in the park or frequent this park or have any information related to this case to reach out to the Brooklyn Park Police Department. With that, I'll stand for questions.
By any chance, when you canvassed the neighborhood, Mark, was there any maybe ring bell, any kind of video in the area that might have captured who you think the suspect might have been fitting that description? Any kind of evidence like that, or you can't comment on that right now?
I can tell you that this better part of the day that we spent gathering ring cameras from many residents. We also asked residents to check their ring camera. Obviously the community up there, we had just left a community meeting with them. They're very concerned about this, and they're frantically going through their cameras and trying to look for any possible evidence. At this moment, we don't have any additional camera footage of the suspect.
Chief, is this suspect someone that you think might be known to the Brooklyn Park Police Department, somebody who fits the description of someone you might have run into in the past here?
The only thing I can tell you at this point is we are getting information from witnesses that this suspect has been seen multiple times in this park recently, by himself, sitting on a bench, looking at his phone. So we know that, or believe that he frequents the area, and that's the only information we have to go on at this point.
At this point, anything you want to tell residents if they see this gentleman, you know, if you come across this suspect here?
Yeah, asking our community to come together. If they know anything, see anything that may be related, even if it seems insignificant, we're asking you to call the Brooklyn Park Police Department and let us look at the evidence, whether it be camera footage or even a tip that you may remember seeing somebody that matches this description. We're asking for any help from our community that we can get.
Chief, I have two questions. The first question, did the child give any details as to actually what took place? Are you able to share any of that?
Yeah, the child was very descriptive in what took place as far as the abuse that they suffered while inside the porta potty. Out of respect for the family and the victim, I'm just not going to share those details.
The other question I have for you is, were any sort of DNA swabs or testing done on the child to try to locate who this person was?
DNA is standard for us to try to collect it in any way that we can to identify suspects. I can tell you that was attempted in this case. Of course, it takes time to be able to vet out if that DNA reveals any results.
Chief, you said you had just come from a community meeting here. Kind of describe, you know, what is the general feeling in the neighborhood right now? You know, and I know you all have spoken to the family, and obviously cannot go into too much detail, but anything you can relay from that?
Yeah, I just left a community meeting that we called up with neighborhoods around that park. It was an incredible turnout. Obviously, very concerned residents by what they're hearing that occurred in one of their local parks. many of them trying to help, many of them gathering information, and are going out to force multiply, so to speak, with their neighbors and try to figure out who did this.
When you mentioned, Chief, that he's been seen, or people believe someone matching that description's been in the park on a regular basis, it sounds like it might be helpful to you, because generally speaking, right, that means they must be familiar with the area, be from the area, or...
Right. Yeah, I mean, when we see somebody that frequents a park, and this person was seen last walking away from the park, so we believe that they likely have a contact in the neighborhood or live in the neighborhood somewhere close that they would walk to. And the fact that they frequent the park leads us to believe the same, that they would live in the area or close by.
Chief, is there anybody you've questioned at this point?
We've questioned numerous people that are really just people of interest that we've questioned and ruled out of having been involved. And we'll continue to follow up on tips and suspects that we have.
Chief, was there ever any sort of confrontation between the family and the suspect when they saw him come out with the boy?
Yeah, so when the family member seen the male come out behind the child, they immediately went and confronted the male, believing something was wrong. The male suspect was able to kind of diminish those concerns, and they let the suspect go. Obviously, when they had learned that there was a sexual assault, the suspect was already gone.
What's your ultimate message? What's the message the department wants to send to residents of Brooklyn Park tonight?
I guess, this is a tragic event. It's both as a professional law enforcement and a father, it's horrifying. And we're asking our community to come together to help us solve that, help us figure out who was in this park and who was victimizing this child.
How many registered sex offenders in that proximity to that park do you have? And are those the folks that you kind of are, I know you look at, obviously, right? Can you tell us that, how many there are and how many you've talked to and ruled out?
Yeah, obviously that's one of the first things we do is pull sex offender data and start looking through it and following up on it. I can't tell you what the number is right off the top of my head in that area, but that's certainly something we've been doing all day today.
Could you give me a ballpark, half a dozen that you talked to?
I'd have to email it to you. I'm just nervous to even tell you because, we have kind of circles of interest, and then we expand that and go wider and wider, and there's different levels of sex offenders, some that have moved, so it's just a little more complex. I think it'd be easier if I just sent you the data.
So could I say that there are some registered sex offenders in that area that you have talked to?
That we have looked into, yes.
Yeah, and ruled them out?
Yes.
Okay.
I know you mentioned that the suspect was a black male. Was this an African-American family as well that was involved in this?
I'm not going to identify the race of the family. Again, this has been a very tragic event for them. Trying to be very respectful of what they just were through and the fact that they frequent this park. I'm just going to avoid identifying them at this point.